What we have here is our fuel tank. Now this had a little bit of rust on the top of it, and it was rusting on the inside just a little bit. So I decided to, well, for the inside, I filled it up with Evapor Rust, and that took care of all the rust on the inside. I then rinsed it out with water and then pure alcohol, and then I sprayed the inside with WD-40, and that'll prevent it from flash rusting until we get fuel in it. For the exterior of the tank, I lightly sanded it with 800 grit sandpaper, and then applied 2 coats or so of a primer, sanded it again, and coated it yet again. And it's pretty much at this point, once this cures, it'll be ready for its top coat. So let's take a moment and talk about what paint products I'm using for these parts. So I've got the headlamp housing, which is made of plastic, and I've got the fuel tank, which is made of steel. And the fuel tank has one unique little requirement, that you need some fuel resistance to the finish so that it doesn't wash away when you overfill the tank, or as the tank ventilates, the fumes don't cause the paint to wrinkle and sag, because that will happen. When you paint motorcycle tanks especially, you really have to use certain materials so this doesn't happen, because it will happen. Let's talk a little bit about that. So, for a primer, for both this piece and the fuel tank, I'm using this Rust-Oleum self-etching primer. I didn't go out and buy this for this project. I bought this for a different project that required self-etching primer, but because it's still sitting in my closet, it's going to waste, not being used, I figured, what the hell, I'll use it up. So I used that primer on this and the fuel tank. I prepared these 2 parts differently. Now this thing here, this is made of plastic, and I wanted to keep the original paint as intact as possible because it provides almost like a pseudo primer, if you will. The thing is, these plastics in the earlier days, they used a variety of different plastic formulas, as they still do to this day, but I think they've standardized a lot of these things. The thing is, these earlier plastics required special primers so that the paint would, stick to them. And I don't know what primer they used, and the methods that are used to determine that are somewhat arcane. You would have to do chemical or burn tests to see how the plastic would react in certain circumstances. And that would tell you whether it was, I don't know, PVC or polyethyl styroclean, whatever. There's all these different types of formulas. Abutylstyrene or ABS. And they didn't actually always stamp what plastics were used. It just says made in Japan, and there's a part number on there. So anyway, how do we handle that? Well, here's what we're going to do. We're going to use the existing paint, which has been applied using the right primers. We're going to rough it up, sand it a little bit with 800 grit, clean it, degrease it, treat it with a wax remover, and then we're going to apply the base coat for my new paint job, which happens to be primer. But I'm not going to put primer directly on that plastic. No, I'm going to use an adhesion promoter, which I've learned to use this stuff on almost all plastic parts because it really works. It helps adhere this primer to the paint below almost flawlessly. Now this is a primer, but it's clear. The thing is, we're applying a color coat. The thing is, these paints claim they don't require any primers, but if you want a nice even finish, a nice color that's uniform, you're going to want to use a primer. Because while it may be red underneath, there are some spots where the paint has chipped, so there's white exposed, especially right here. There's like no paint underneath this. And that's where the adhesion promoter helps. Because even though I don't have the right primer underneath, the adhesion promoter will at least fill in for the job, at least for some smaller surface areas. And I'm okay with that. Moving along, we're going to get this primer on there, we're going to let it cure, then we're going to take some more 800 grit sandpaper, and then we're going to wet sand the whole thing and do it again. More primer. And until it's nice and smooth. And that's where we're at on this part. The fuel tank is at the same point. I just gave it its last wet sand and repaint with primer. And we're now ready to put our color coat on. So paint is always multiple stages, multiple coats. You've got your primer. Or in this case, we've got an adhesion promoter. We've got a primer. We've got a color coat. If we're doing a metallic, we would have like a metallic, well, it depends on what kind of paint you're using. Some paints have metallics in them, but some people add metallics on top of a color coat. I think the professionals will do it that way. And then you've got your top coat, your clear coat. And that's where things get interesting. Because I lack all the facilities to do a proper paint job, I mean, look, this is my condo. I have no garage. I have no shed. I have no outdoor covered work areas. So I have to, and I work, actually by the time I get home, it's almost dark. So I have to do all my paint work on a deck in the freezing cold with nothing but a porch light. Yeah, that's what I have. I got to work with what I got. I can't run an air compressor, so I can't use a spray gun. I mean, there's so many things I can't do here. I have to do what I have, what I can with what I've got. And I'm making oranges out of apples here. Or lemonade out of orange juice. Whatever. I'm the thing with the fruit, whatever. I'm doing that. And this is how I'm able to achieve a somewhat pseudo-professional-ish paint job. Let me start over here. So these are over-the-counter spray cans. They come in the colors that they come in. So I had to go on. I contacted Rust-Oleum. I got them to send me a catalog of all the colors they offer, and I found that their gloss cherry red was an almost dead ringer for the factory finish. So using that information, I went over to my local AutoZone and I picked up a can of gloss cherry red. So this is not what a professional body shop would use. They're going to use paints that come directly from Behr, DuPont. What was the other one? There's a bunch of different paint companies that produce professional paints for the auto industry. And those paints are not ready to spray like this is. They come in a quart or a gallon can or a pint can based on how much they need. And they have to add chemicals to this at the paint shop before they put it in their spray guns. Those chemicals are called activators. Also, they'll often use, if the paint is too thick, they'll add paint thinner. If it's too thin, they'll add more paint. You know, and they get the viscosity just right based on the humidity, the temperature, and there's so many reasons why a proper paint job costs so damn much, because a lot of work goes into getting the paint prepped and ready to use. We don't have that luxury, at least I don't. So what I'm going to be using are these over-the-counter cans. But there's one thing that I didn't touch on, and that's the paint hardness. So these paints that you spray on, let's say I put just this red on this part, give it a year, give it 2 years. That paint will start to get chalky and dusty, and it's going to scratch real easily. How do we protect it? Well, we could buy clear coat. Rust-Oleum does sell a clear coat that works with that paint. However, that clear coat doesn't have the hardness needed for day-to-day use. It'll scratch just as easily as that will. And it too will eventually oxidize. But there's a solution that does not require me to go to a paint shop and have them do the job. I can use this stuff here. This is where the magic happens. This is 2K clear. This is essentially an affordable version of what's in those spray guns down at your local Pay and Spray. This contains clear coat with an activator built in. And what you do is you take this little plunger and you push this little button in the bottom of the tank or the can, and it releases an activation chemical that turns this into almost like an epoxy. And like an epoxy, you only have a certain amount of time to work with it before it completely turns to rock inside the can. This stuff cures with oxygen. This is chemically cured, if you want to look at it that way. That chemical curing process turns this into an almost professional level clear coat that will resist scratching, chemicals like gasoline, and oxidization. So that is why we're able to paint the fuel tank without worrying about the fuel spray destroying the paint. Because this stuff will do it, and it'll do it well. I've never used this stuff, and by the way, the time frame to use the entire can before it turns into a pumpkin is just 48 hours. So I have to get all my parts ready to go before I can activate this can and use it. So we've got to make sure that we get our our color coat all nice and done right on both the fuel tank and the headlamp housing, and then we're going to apply that. And you apply that when the you don't want to wait for this to cure, because in order for this to bond to the color without any and I've done this. This has happened to me. You're going to get like a permanent pattern of just like a whitish, dusty appearance on that part. You want to make sure that to prevent that from happening, you want to make sure that the paint is still somewhat tacky before you apply your clear. That's the trick. You never want to apply clear on hardened and cured paints. Don't do it. It won't work. So, anyway, unless there are ways to prep it so you can do that, but that's not what I'm going to do. So, a little bit about painting. Again, I'm not a professional, even though that says professional use only. That's why they don't sell this in auto parts stores, by the way, because it's extremely hazardous. I'm going to have to bring this to work. There is a spray booth that I can use if I need to, and I'm going to use it for this, and only this. So anyway, let's get on to the next thing, and I'll catch you on the flip side. So I got a shipment. This is it. This is the last of it. So these are clips for the side panels. I had one of them actually broke off of me, so I bought a full set. And I've got some other things. So we got, these are the fuel filters. So this bike uses two in-tank filters, one for the main fuel line, the other one for the one below that, which is the reserve line. So these are to protect the petcock from any debris. Now after the petcock, there's another filter that I am adding, and it's a third-party filter, and that is to protect the carburetor should the petcock begin to disintegrate internally. I don't want it to clog up my carburetor. So I got some other things. These are mostly petcock parts, and this is a fuel cap seal. The original one was made of cork. Now they're made out of rubber. Alright, so this is our fuel petcock. What it does is it manages fuel flow. And it has three positions: prime, reserve, and on. When it's in its prime position, it allows fuel to flow freely from the main fuel input, which is this one right here. And it allows fuel to flow through this unencumbered, whether the engine is rotating or generating vacuum or not. This device on the end is a vacuum actuated valve. When there's vacuum present, this opens up and it allows fuel to flow when this device is in either the reserve or the on position. When the engine stops, it shuts the fuel flow off to prevent the carburetor from overfilling. And in the reserve position, it shuts off the on input and it switches to this reserve input, which allows the secondary fuel source, which is the lower one on the fuel tank, to supply fuel. This is what motorcycle manufacturers did. In fact, even some early car manufacturers did this in the absence of a fuel gauge. what it does is it allows you to basically, drive where you need to go. But when it's in the on position and it starts to sputter out, it's just telling you that it's low on fuel. And if you reach back and switch it to reserve, it opens up the reserve fuel input, which is the reserve, which is the lower port on the tank. And that'll give you, X amount of miles to get to a gas station. Pretty clever. It works pretty well. But this one, being 37 years old, it's got some issues. It's actually closer to 38 years old now because it's now 2008. So we're going to essentially rebuild this Petcock using parts that I just scored from SuzukiPartsHouse.com. They're not paying me to say this. I just believe they provide a great service. And decent prices. SuzukiPartsHouse.com. So, a couple of things I want to do. So, this is a bowl that goes in the bottom of this Petcock, and its job is to collect any particles or sediment. It also allows you to check for any water contamination. So what this does is it provides a place for water to settle, and over the course of a period of time, eventually this bowl can fill up with water or sediment, and you're supposed to take it off, drain it, and put it back on again. So what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to take this bowl off. Now I am replacing this bowl because it has degraded substantially over the course of 38 years. The plastic is beginning to degrade, and there's a micro hairline crack along the side of this bowl. It actually is bad enough to where you can see it from the inside. It also has a lot of crystallization. If you look at the structure of the plastic, you can see a lot of little crisscrossing, straight patterns. There's not much left to this, and it needs to be replaced because it is about ready to completely fall apart. In fact, if I squeeze it just a little bit, it might start cracking. So while I can still buy these parts, I decided to go ahead and order a new one. Didn't cost a lot of money either. Now inside of here is a little rubber seal. I ordered that as well. Here's a little rubber seal. So we're going to put that in there, take the old one out, put the new one in, and it's done. I'm very pleased to find that Suzuki still sells these parts, and I don't have to go to some exotic land to find these things. Now there's a little mesh screen in there too, but it's in pretty good shape. I'm not worried about that. That mesh screen is meant to provide yet another layer of particle filtration. And that screen comes out if you blow on it, and you can see inside of here, make sure that's all good and clean, and it is. Looks pretty good. Really not much in there. And this screen is still in one piece. We'll put it back in there. So yeah, they give you two different ways to filter the fuel to prevent any contamination of the carburetor. I think now that I know it has that much protection, I don't think I'm going to need those inline filters after all. So maybe I won't even bother putting them in. I did buy some inline filters, just generic ones, but I don't think I'm going to use them. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put this little bowl back on. This is a brand new bowl, new seal. That'll be good for another 37 years. You don't want to go too tight with it, just snug it up with a pair of pliers. Look at that, beautiful. Brand new. Alright, there's another seal we want to change out, and that is inside here. This is the main selector switch seal. That's the name I just made up for it. And it's a unique little piece of kit, and it's very uniquely made. So it has 4 holes in it. Each hole aligns to a specific position on the selector. And we want to make sure that goes in the right way. So let's take a look at what's in there now. Now what happens is when these go bad, the fuel flow can often continue when it's not supposed to, or it can go in the wrong direction or in the wrong spot. So like if you select, for example, let's say you have it set to on. If this seal fails, what is going to happen is which position is it? The prime position, which allows fuel to flow regardless of what this vacuum switch or vacuum valve is doing, can allow fuel to flow right into the carburetor no matter what. And that's a bad thing. You can flood your engine out that way. In fact, you can destroy an engine that way. In an extreme situation, you can hydrolock a two-stroke engine if this seal goes bad. It's seriously, it can get pretty nasty. You can fill the entire engine with fuel, and I've seen this happen. So, if such a part is available, my suggestion is just go ahead and replace it. Because when I take this apart, you're going to see what's in there now is just a little bit chewed up. Just a little bit. Now, being that these parts are made for two-stroke engines, I'm going to say that there's a little bit of an oil resistance to these parts. So I'm going to pre-coat this new seal with a little bit of oil. So you can see on the back side of this valve, there's a little bit of some black stuff here. That black stuff is actually from this seal degrading. And I just need to make a quick note of its position. Okay, noted. Looks like the 3 bigger holes go around these ports, and the smaller hole is right about here. So I'm going to gently lift it out with my screwdriver. This is one of those parts that you don't always want to, you won't always think about this until it goes bad. Like, I think a lot of people, they just, and it's one of those parts that can cause so many headaches when it does, and it will fail. And look, this, oh my god, this one it's just falling apart. You can't see this, but I'm going to show you in a second here. It is completely falling apart. Good call. Really good call. Make sure it's clean in there. I'm going to take a clean rag and I'm going to just kind of dab it in here and make sure it's nice and clean. There we go. Yep, good and clean. Okay, then we're going to take our new one and we're going to pop it in there. Yeah, these Petcocks, when they fail, it's one of those things, man. It's one of those things. They always go bad at the worst time. I'll tell you a story of one that went bad on a bike that I almost bought. I think I told this story before. It's a long one, but well, maybe not. So I was looking at buying a Honda Elite. This is after I sold my Elite 150, and I'm like, I want another one. So I went out, and I went to Craigslist, and I looked at all the bikes that were available to me. And there was an Elite one. There were 2 Elite 150s, a red one and a white one, like a his and hers. The guy wanted $1,000 a piece, and they only had like 1,200 miles each on them. They were in really good shape. So I found out where the guy was, and it turns out he runs a pet crematorium, or an animal crematorium. And I drove up to this crematorium, which is creepy as all hell. And the guy that greeted me at the door was kind of like an assistant, right? Hold on, I gotta get some oil for this seal. Very pack. So anyway, I go up to this place. The guy shows me the bike. Actually, there were 2 of them, red and white. And I looked at them both. I'm like, you know, I kind of like the red one because I like the color and it's in good shape. So I'm like, before we talk about price, let me just hear it run. So the guy says, oh, no problem. And it's like, we just charged the battery. He goes to start the thing up. Actually, I started it. I'm putting oil on this right here. That's just to prevent it from galling when we go to turn the gas on for the first time. Anyway, I'm looking at the bike. It's in good shape. Go to start it up. It was very hard starting, and that's not unexpected for, you know, it was a 1987 Elite 150. So I'm like, all right, whatever, hard starting. But then it starts up, and it's all smoking and crap. I'm like, you know, I'm going to just check a few things out real quick. So I'm like, okay. So I take the oil cap off the engine, the oil fill cap, and gasoline, pure gasoline, just starts gushing out of the motor. And I'm like, well, Houston, we have a problem here. And he's like, what do you mean? What did you do? I'm like, well, the fuel petcock, which is this thing right here, appears to have gotten stuck open. And the end result was it filled the engine with gasoline. And at that point, the guy was like, he was furious. I'm like, well, I don't know what to tell you. this engine, I mean, it's like, how much have you run this engine? He's like, oh, I ran it. I drove it all around. I'm like, you drove it full of gasoline? Are you kidding me? And he got really mad. He was so mad. He thought I broke the thing. He's like, it's your fault. Oh, my God, you son of a... I'm like, well, you know, you were going to sell me an engine that probably has a lot of damage now because you ran it this way. Oh, man, that was a very bad, very, very awkward transaction. I did not buy the bike. I would have bought it, but he wouldn't come down in the price. I'm like, well, because I'm trying to use this as a negotiating tactic because I'm willing to rebuild the engine for that price. I mean, it was in mint condition otherwise. Oh, no, he wasn't hearing any of it. No, your fault. Fake news. You broke it. Anyway, so this moves nice and smoothly now. Got a little bit of oil on there so that it doesn't gall or wear down too much. And we've got a partially rebuilt Petcock. Now, if we were to go any further with this, we'd be tearing this diaphragm out and replacing it. But I've tested this diaphragm. It works. There are no rips. It does what it's supposed to do. Okay, let's take a look at the old seal. It's all cracked up. This thing is gone. Completely gone. I can tear it in half if I wanted to. And this little bowl seal is completely crushed and flattened. These are just these two little parts in the wild can cause this can cause the bike to be stranded. That's what this would do if it were left like that. But we're not going to leave it that way. As for the little bowl, this is one of those parts that if it's just hit the wrong way would shatter. In fact, I'm going to shatter it right now. I'm going to show you just how fragile it is. This is crystallized plastic. There's no structure left to it. See? Just like that. The new one, if I did the same thing, it would bend. But this has no flex left in it. It's completely hardened to nothing. Trash. And this is why when you buy an older bike, you often have a breakdown or 2 or 3 or 27 before you finally break down and tear the whole thing apart and do what I'm doing right now. Another often overlooked part is your fuel cap seal. These often go bad, and they go bad silently. This is the original cork gasket, and it's just bad. It's no good. It's cracked in many spots. It's still in one piece, but not for long. So I bought a new one. Now, they no longer sell the cork gasket, even though the cork gasket would add a little authenticity to its age, but that's alright. I really would rather be functional and historically accurate. But here's the new one. It's made of rubber, and that just clips right on there. That's going to provide a nice tight seal, and you can see there's a vent here. Make sure that's not blocked. This vent allows the tank to breathe. These earlier bikes, prior to about I think it was 93 or 92, it was early 90s, when American motorbike manufacturers started complying with California standards, and I think it was voluntarily at first. Anyway, in like 93 or so, they started moving to carbon canisters and sealed fuel systems, but this is old enough to have been naturally vented. So I'm going to clean this up with some steel wool. There's a little bit of corrosion on here, but I want it to look nice, you know. So. And there's another illustrative example of just what happens to these old plastic and rubber parts as they get old. These body clips, so it started out with one. I had broken one end off when I went to go take the panel off. And that happened, you know, whatever. I go to take it off, and the thing just crumbled. Like the clips on the back just crumbled. And I had a full set, brand new, full set of these things. So I'm like, you know, I'm going to take the rest of them off. And they all did the same damn thing. They just crumble. Because this plastic is so old. And that's why, like, buying a car that was made after, like, the 1960s is such a gamble, because they use the same types of plastics and seals and other little various bits and pieces on automobiles. So you could be restoring, or say you get a great deal on like a 1980 Toyota Corona or whatever. or whatever you find and you like it, it's the car that you've always wanted, you go to buy this car and you start working on it. And just little things turn into fiascos because you've got clips snapping, you've got panels crumbling, you've got just hoses snapping in half, wiring that the insulation is crumbling on. I mean, this stuff happens in real life, and that's why, you know, working on an old vehicle, be it a motorcycle, a car, a moped, even some bicycles, can be such a hassle because these parts do not age well. So that's why, you know, a simple repair job on this bike turned into a complete restoration, because every time I took something apart, removed this or moved that, or I'm finding more and more problems that are just waiting to happen. So that's why, you know, this was such an extensive project, because just one little thing just spirals out of control. Before you know it, you're ripping the entire thing apart. You know, age can cause more damage to a machine than mileage. Age can cause more damage to a motorbike, to a car, than mileage. Because age doesn't matter. It doesn't matter how many miles are on it. It doesn't matter where it was. It matters where it was stored. But regardless of all that, rubber parts, plastic parts, vinyl, some wiring, especially the later soy-based wiring that was used on some automobiles, these things degrade regardless of who's driving and for how long. That's a very valuable lesson you don't always learn until you start a project like this, even a simple project. And you don't always figure this out until you're knee-deep in parts and there's no end in sight. So, let's pick this up after I get these parts painted, and you'll see what the end result is. Until then.